Amelia Whittaker never asked for much. She wasn't the type of woman who dreamed in diamonds or fantasized about private jets. Raised in a modest suburb of Sacramento by a single mother who worked 2 jobs and still managed to make every birthday cake from scratch, Amelia had grown up believing in hard work, loyalty, and the kind of love that showed up, not the kind that whispered sweet promises and vanished. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. So when she met Brian Harrow at university, she didn't see the last name. She didn't care that his family was on the board of trustees or that the Harrow name sat on 3 buildings across campus. He was just Brian to her. Smart, sarcastic, and a little too confident. They met in the library when he accidentally knocked over her tower of research books with his messenger bag. She gave him a look sharp enough to draw blood. He apologized. She rolled her eyes. He asked her out anyway. They had coffee on the quad. Then again the next day. By the end of the semester, they were inseparable. He told her he loved how grounded she was. How unlike anyone else in his world she seemed. And when he talked about his dreams, becoming a partner at his father's elite corporate law firm, she listened, encouraged, and offered to support him however she could. "I'm going to marry you," he told her one night, lying on her dorm room floor, flipping through flashcards for a contract law exam. She laughed, thinking he was just being charming. But he did. 2 years later, right after he passed the bar. The proposal wasn't extravagant. He didn't need it to be. He knew Amelia better than anyone. He knew she'd prefer something quiet, intimate, and genuine. And that's exactly what it was. Just the 2 of them in the garden of her childhood home, a ring tucked in his pocket, and a soft yes through happy tears. They married in a small ceremony, with Brian's mother notably absent. She had made it clear that Amelia, with her public school education and sensible shoes, was a temporary distraction, not marriage material. His father, however, attended. Tall, sharp-eyed, and coldly cordial, Richard Harrow shook Amelia's hand and offered no words of welcome. But at least he was there. It didn't matter, though. Brian was what mattered. Amelia put off her graduate program and took on 2 jobs to support them while Brian settled into his junior associate role. Long nights turned into longer years. She handled bills, made late-night coffee runs to his office, even reviewed contracts with him over dinner. She became, in every way, his partner. But Brian changed slowly. First, it was the little things. A forgotten anniversary. A condescending tone when she mispronounced a Latin legal term. Then came the criticisms. Her clothes were too plain, her conversation too dull at firm events, her presence a bit provincial for the circles they were now part of. He started coming home later and later, often drunk, sometimes silent. Amelia asked questions. He gave vague answers. She convinced herself it was just the stress. The day it all shattered began like any other. She woke up before him, made coffee, and packed his briefcase. He barely acknowledged her. Just a grunt, a muttered thanks. And he was gone. She was tidying up when she noticed the envelope on the kitchen counter. It had her name on it. Inside, divorce papers. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. He was seeking a dissolution of marriage on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. The tone was cold, clinical. There was no mention of the life they'd built. No acknowledgement of her sacrifice. Then came the kicker. He was requesting that all marital assets remain under his name, citing premarital ownership and financial contribution. Amelia frowned. That wasn't right. Most of what they had built had been acquired during their marriage. She scanned the documents again. There, buried on page 8, was a reference to a prenuptial agreement. Amelia's heart nearly stopped. They'd signed nothing before the wedding. She would have remembered. She picked up the phone and called him. Straight to voicemail. She left a message. Then another. Then she drove to his office. The receptionist looked at her like she was an intruder. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrow is in a meeting." "He's my husband," she said. But that didn't matter anymore. She waited for 2 hours before Brian finally appeared. He looked surprised and mildly annoyed. "I didn't want to do this here," he said, guiding her into an empty conference room. "You served me papers," she hissed. "What the hell is going on?" "It's better this way," he said, adjusting his cuffs. "We've grown apart. Brian, you can't just pretend I don't exist. You can't claim we had a prenup." "We did," he interrupted. Amelia stared at him. "No, we didn't." He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Yes, we did. Don't you remember? We signed one right before the wedding. In front of my father's lawyer." It was like the floor disappeared beneath her. She blinked. "You forged my signature." He smirked just faintly. "I wouldn't say that. Let's just say my legal team is very good." Her stomach turned. "Why? Why are you doing this?" "Because I'm moving on. And honestly, you were a placeholder, Amelia. You helped me get where I needed to go. That's all." She slapped him. Her hand stung. His face reddened. He didn't hit her back, he just smiled. "You just sealed it," he said coolly. "You'll get nothing." And that's exactly what she got. Within the week, she was out of the condo. The locks were changed. The joint bank account emptied. Her name wasn't on the property, the car, or the firm's ownership. She had no savings, no legal team, no family to fall back on. She rented a single bedroom from a nurse she'd met years ago, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, applying for retail jobs just to afford groceries. The world forgot her, and Brian moved on without a scratch. Then, 6 months later, she got a letter. A formal envelope. Embossed seal. Harrow and Fitch, LLP. She almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. Inside was a single sheet. "You are requested to appear for the reading of the last will and testament of Richard Harrow, deceased. Presence is required in person. Date, May 9th. Time, 2 p.m. Location, Harrow and Fitch. Conference room 4C. Amelia read it 3 times before she sat down. Richard Harrow, Brian's father, had died. And for some reason, he wanted her there. Amelia hadn't seen the Harrow office in almost a year. Walking into the downtown skyscraper felt like stepping back into someone else's life. The marbled lobby, the polished glass walls, the subtle scent of imported cedar furniture. It was all the same, but it no longer belonged to her world. A security guard scanned her suspiciously until she gave her name. "Conference room 4C, he said, lifting the rope. "They're expecting you." She walked slowly, her heels clicking against the marble. The halls were lined with faces she remembered. Junior associates she'd once brought coffee to during their late-night briefings. A paralegal who used to ask her for fashion tips now barely nodded as she passed. When she entered room 4C, the room fell into a hush. Brian was there, of course. Immaculate as ever in a tailored navy suit. Hair perfectly combed. Not a wrinkle on his smug expression. He was sitting beside a woman Amelia had never seen before. Model-thin, blonde, with dead eyes and acrylic nails that tapped impatiently on the mahogany table. Brian didn't stand. He didn't even flinch. "Amelia," he said simply, as if greeting a waitress. She ignored him. 3 seats down sat another familiar face. Julian Kramer, Richard Harrow's personal attorney for over 2 decades. Always stiff, always sharp. Julian stood as she approached and offered a surprisingly warm handshake. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. Amelia glanced around. "Why am I here?" "You'll see." The room filled quickly with Harrow family members. Brian's uncle, 2 cousins, and a corporate representative from the Harrow Trust. Everyone chatted quietly, clearly annoyed to be attending yet another procedural formality. To them, it was just a step before dividing the spoils. At precisely 2 p.m., Julian tapped his pen twice against the crystal water glass in front of him and stood. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "As you know, Richard Harrow passed away 3 weeks ago. In accordance with his final instructions, we are gathered to read the contents of his will. Please note, all attendees listed were required to be present. Any absent party would have triggered an automatic annulment of their claim. As all parties are here, we may proceed. Julian opened the file. Brian leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident. Julian cleared his throat and began. To my brother, Nathaniel Harrow, I leave the vintage wine collection and the lake house in Vermont, as discussed. To my nephews, Matthew and Andrew, I leave the family trust dividends, as set forth in Clause 12b, amounting to a 3.5% share each. So far, so predictable. To my son, Brian Harrow. Brian straightened slightly. I leave the sum total of $1, to be delivered to him via certified mail. This sum reflects the exact value of the respect he has shown toward family, honor, and loyalty. The room froze. Someone choked. Brian blinked as if Julian had misread it. What the hell is this? He muttered. Julian, unbothered, continued. The remainder of the estate, including all holdings in Harrow Industries, the primary residence in Bel Air, the offshore accounts, private assets, art collection, and stock portfolio, shall be transferred in full to. Amelia's ears buzzed. Julian looked up. His gaze met hers. Amelia Whittaker Harrow, in recognition of her integrity, sacrifice, and the fact that she was the only person to ever treat me like a father and not a checkbook. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Ungus. Mutters. Chairs scraped the floor. Brian stood up abruptly. This is a joke. Julian turned to him, face unreadable. It is not. She's my ex-wife, Brian snapped. We're divorced. She has no claim. Julian lifted a finger. You divorced her 6 months ago, Mr. Harrow. This will was signed 10 months ago. Notarized. Witnessed. Filed. Your father knew what he was doing. I'll contest it. You're welcome to try. But I should warn you. Your father was extremely thorough. Any contestation triggers a no contest clause. You forfeit even the $1. Brian's new girlfriend made a strangled noise, stood, and left. Amelia hadn't moved. She sat perfectly still, trying to understand what had just happened, trying to reconcile the fact that Richard Harrow, an icy, formal man who had never once called her by her first name, had left her everything, and Brian nothing. You can't do this, Brian hissed. You have no idea what this will do to the company. It's done, Julian said, closing the folder. The documents have already been filed with the court. Transfers begin next week. Unless Ms. Harrow. Whittaker, Amelia corrected quietly. Julian smiled faintly. Unless Ms. Whittaker wishes to decline. All eyes turned to her. She stood slowly, the weight of the room pressing down on her chest. No, she said. I don't decline. Brian's face turned the color of old brick. This is revenge, he snarled. You set this up. You conned him. Amelia looked at him, calm now. Cold. The hurricane had passed, and in its place was something steelier. I didn't con him, she said. You just underestimated the one person in your life who never wanted anything from you. She left the room before he could speak again. The news broke 3 days later. Ex-wife inherits fortune from father-in-law. Displaces CO son. Corporate legal drama as Harrow Industries faces unexpected ownership shift. Who is Amelia Whittaker? The woman who took the empire her husband tried to erase her from. Suddenly, reporters camped outside her apartment. Photographers chased her from grocery stores. Old friends reached out. People who hadn't spoken to her in years, suddenly remembering birthdays, old memories, shared coffee runs. She ignored most of them. What she couldn't ignore was the estate. It was massive. Hundreds of millions in assets, shares in 5 corporations, homes in 4 states. The legal paperwork alone could have filled a library. She needed help. Real help. And she knew exactly who to call. Amelia didn't trust easily anymore. But she knew one name that still meant something in the legal world. Harper Duval. Harper had been Richard Harrow's private advisor for over a decade. Sharp as a scalpel, feared in courtrooms from coast to coast, and one of the few people Richard had openly respected. She hadn't attended the will reading, but after a quick message from Julian Kramer, she showed up at Amelia's temporary apartment 2 days later. She wore no makeup, carried no purse, and got straight to the point. "You're not safe," she said. Amelia blinked. "What do you mean?" "Brian will retaliate." Quietly. "He'll try to get your power revoked through loopholes, board interference, influence campaigns. If that fails, he'll come at you legally. That's why I'm here. Richard left me instructions." She pulled a black leather folder from her coat and set it on the table. Amelia stared at it. "I thought the will was the only document." "It was the only public one," Harper said. Inside the folder were several pages. Handwritten notes, letters, a video on a flash drive, and at the center, a signed amendment to the infamous prenup. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The original prenup had been quietly signed behind her back. A betrayal she thought she'd never undo. But Richard had discovered it, and amended it in secret, using his authority as the family trust's overseer. Any attempt by Brian Harrow to divorce Amelia Whittaker without just cause, defined herein as infidelity, abuse, or criminal negligence, shall result in the immediate and irrevocable forfeiture of all Harrow family inheritance, assets, and shares. Said assets shall be transferred in full to Amelia Whittaker Harrow. Amelia's breath caught. He knew. Richard had known what his son was capable of, and he'd planned for it. Harper slid over a sealed envelope. "There's also this, dated 9 days before his death. He wanted you to read it only after reviewing the documents." Amelia opened it slowly. It was a letter, inked in clean, meticulous handwriting. "Amelia, I may not have been warm, but I was watching. You treated me like a man, not a bank. You treated my son better than he ever deserved. I failed to raise him right. This is my attempt to make amends. Don't waste what I'm giving you. And don't let them take it from you." Her hands shook. It was the closest thing to love she'd ever received from that man, and it felt more real than anything Brian had ever given her. The Harrow board called an emergency meeting the following week. The room was filled with men who looked like Brian, confident, condescending, and vaguely bored. They expected a grieving ex-wife out of her depth. Instead, they got Amelia in a tailored black suit, Harper Duval at her side, and Julian Kramer already seated at the head of the table, waiting. "Let's begin," Amelia said calmly. Brian walked in 5 minutes late, looking like he hadn't slept. He saw Amelia and faltered for half a second before pasting on a smirk. "This meeting's a waste of time," he said. "She's not fit to run a corporation." Julian stood. "Actually, she's not just fit. She's the new primary shareholder. And, per Richard Harrow's explicit instruction, the sole beneficiary of his voting power." Brian turned to the others. "You're really going to let this happen? Over a woman who was homeless 3 months ago?" Harper stepped forward. "Be careful, Brian. You're being recorded. And your father predicted this exact tantrum." The projector clicked on. Richard's face filled the screen. It was the video from the flash drive. His voice was clear, steady, and devastating. "If you're watching this, Brian, then you've proven me right. Gave you every chance. I built a legacy for you. And you threw it away for ego, greed, and cruelty. You forged documents, lied to your wife, sold company shares without board approval. I've seen the reports, and I've made sure you face the consequences. Amelia is now the future of this company. If you fight her, you will lose." Brian was white as a sheet. The board was silent. Julian turned to Amelia. "Do you wish to remove Brian from his executive role?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to Brian and looked him dead in the eye. "I don't need revenge," she said. "But I won't let you sit in a chair built by better people than you. You're done here." Then to the board. "Motion to remove Brian Harrow as CEO. Effective immediately." One by one, hands went up. Unanimous. Brian staggered back a step. "You'll regret this." "No," Amelia said softly. "You will." Weeks passed. The media called it the most poetic justice in corporate history. Amelia didn't give many interviews, but the few she did give were powerful, measured, dignified, and quietly commanding. She didn't flaunt her fortune. She restructured the company, increased female leadership roles, and created a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, named after her mother. She declined the Bel Air mansion and sold the yacht. But she kept one painting from Richard's art collection, a portrait of a lighthouse in a storm. When asked why, she said, "It reminded me that even when you're surrounded by darkness, you can still stand tall." 1 year later, Amelia walked past a bakery on a rainy Tuesday and paused. Inside was a man hunched over a table, sipping cheap coffee and staring at a crumpled resume. Brian. No one in the firm would touch him. The media fallout had scorched his name. Even the girlfriend had left him after the money disappeared. He looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just kept walking. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.